Hi everyone, I'm Arto, and I answer your Egyptology questions. And a couple of weeks ago, there were a lot of social media posts going around, people wishing each other a Happy New Year for the year 6263. Of course, this was based on the ancient Egyptian calendar. So a friend of mine asked me about this, and he said, "Is any of this true?" And I told him no. And here's why. I'll explain why in two ways. One way, it'll be through just a general explanation of ancient Egyptian calendars, and then the second way, we'll go into a little more detail. So to the ancient Egyptians, the year was made up of 12 months. Sound familiar? But instead of having 4 seasons of 3 months, they had 3 seasons of 4 months, which still adds up to 12 months. All these seasons were based around the inundation of the Nile. So the first one, the inundation season, called Achet, was the inundation season. The second one, Peret, had to do it's the word Peret literally means to go forth, or growth. It was the growing season. And then the third one, as you probably guessed, was the harvest season, Shemu. Achet, Peret, Shemu, the agricultural cycle. So it's only natural for the ancient Egyptians to have based their calendar, their year, around the agricultural cycle. I mean, Egypt was an agrarian society. The Nile was their everything, so that just makes sense. But here's where it gets a little bit different. The ancient Egyptians didn't number their years quite like how we do today. So, based on the Gregorian calendar and the Hijri calendar, it's not based on one single event that happened at some point in the past that they took as their basis, and then they start numbering their years ever since. So, first year's year one, year two, until you get to year 2021. That's not how it worked. To the ancient Egyptians, new beginnings were sacred. So every day was a new beginning. It was almost as if, and to the ancient Egyptians, actually quite literally so, the universe was recreated every day by the sun god at dawn. Every year, same thing. Similarly to the ancient Egyptians, the coming of a new king onto the throne was just as significant an event. It was a new beginning, a clean slate. So the ancient Egyptians didn't have one fixed event from which they numbered their years, because it was reset with the ascension of every new king to the throne. So for example, the equivalent of, I don't know, let's say the 4th of March, if that's the day on which the current king ascended the throne, that is to say became king, then when it's time for, let's say, the equivalent of the 31st of December and the 1st of January, it's still gonna be his first year. It only switches to being his second year starting the 4th of March of the following year, the anniversary. And royal texts indeed do begin with the introduction being, regnal year number, season, the inundation season, month 3, day I don't know what, under the king of Upper and Lower Egypt, so and so, and then the text proper starts. So it was reset with each and every king. So the ancient Egyptians never had a year numbering system that really ever numbered in the 100s. No single king reigned for that long. So the year 6263, if you count that, it's based on the year 4241 BC. So obviously it's based on some kind of event that happened in the distant past. So the ancient Egyptians themselves never did it that way. So that already disproves it. The whole Happy New Year 6263, which is based on some kind of event that happened in 4241 BC, it's nonsense. It's not true because that's not how the ancient Egyptians counted their years. Well, then, where did this year come from then? 4241. Where did it come from? Surely it hasn't been pulled out of thin air. Well, I looked into the matter, and as it turns out, it's all based on the arguments made by this German Egyptologist, Edward Meyer, in his book Ägyptische Chronologie, Egyptian Chronology, published in 1904. So, it's already an old book, so already red flag. You should be a little bit skeptical already. But anyway, in this book, in order for me to be able to explain to you where and how he got to this number, this date, to be more specific, 19th of July, 4241 BC, as the year in which the ancient Egyptians started counting their years, founded their calendar, we have to go into a little bit of astronomy, and to be more specific, into this astronomical event called the heliacal rising of Sirius. Don't close the window just yet. I know that sounds scary, but I'll explain this, in little chunks, and hopefully everything will be clear as day. Right, so, the ancient Egyptians, as I said, their calendar was based around the Nile and its seasons, right? So, it floods, so the Nile waters go up, and then they recede. You go into the second season, that's where you grow your crops, and then you harvest them in time before the following inundation takes place. But the inundation it's not clockwork. It doesn't happen exactly every 365 days, right? It's a natural event that's all based on meteorological conditions, and it varies. It can come a month late, a month and a half late. It's no basis for any organized society that's planning for the future, planning crops, food distribution, all kinds of things like that. A system of approximately ranging for like a month and a half, maybe even more, is no sound basis for a calendar. You can't do that. So they found something else. So around the time, so the inundation taking place, they looked to an astronomical event that coincided with it. This astronomical event is the heliacal rising of Sirius. So Sirius, the dog star, is a type of star that astronomers call a decan. These stars, unlike the North Star, the polar star, they set below the horizon. For 70 days in the year, they are completely invisible at night. They spend it under the horizon, and then 295 days in the year you can see them. But of course, the first appearance of these stars was above the horizon for the first time after an absence of 70 days was a big event for timekeeping purposes. And the cycle of each of these stars, of their first appearance with the sun above the horizon after an absence of 70 days, happens every 365 days. And this event, this astronomical event called the heliacal rising, that's what that is. Heliacal, coming from the word helios, for sun in Greek, was, like I said, a good way for to keep time, because it's precise, it's clockwork. I mean, this is astronomy. The ancient Egyptians noticed this kind of thing happened every 365 days for each of these stars. Well, perfect. And they picked Sirius, more specifically, as the basis of their new year. Why is that? Because Sirius is a very special star. this star was known as Sothis to the Greeks. It was known as Sopdet to the ancient Egyptians, whom they associate with the goddess Isis. Sirius, Canis Major, is the brightest star in the night sky, as seen by the naked eye. It's very special, and for that reason, the first appearance of this star, after its absence under the horizon for 70 days, its first appearance as it rises with the sun, or just before, as soon as it's visible, just before sunrise, that was heralded as the beginning of the new year to the ancient Egyptians. And they made that coincide with the Nile flood, or roughly, because, like I said, the Nile flood isn't clockwork. So, it coincides very nicely with that. And the ancient Egyptians indeed saw that, this kind of event was happening every 365 days. So it was a very sound system for a calendric system. But let's not forget that even though the ancient Egyptians were kind of right about the year being 365 days long, they weren't exactly right. Because in fact, the year is 365.25 and a whole bunch of numbers long. So year after year, there's no real difference. It's not noticeable. It's still reliable. You're still getting this astronomical event marking the new year every 365 days. Great. But every year, just a little bit, the heliacal rising of Sirius was happening just a little bit later, until, gradually they get out of sync, until you're celebrating your new year 120 years later, but the heliacal rising of Sirius is happening a whole month later. So, it's getting out of sync. And the next time they're in sync again, so, obviously over very long time scales. In fact, 1,460 years is the number of years needed for the heliacal rising of Sirius to once again coincide with New Year's Day. Well, 1,461 in the Gregorian calendar, 1,460 that's in the Julian, but anyway, you get the idea. And this cycle is called the Sophic Cycle, after Sothis, what the Greeks called the star Sirius. So, Edward Meyer assumed that the ancient Egyptians based their calendar around the heliacal rising of Sothis. And looking to historical sources, he found a confirmed heliacal rising of the star Sirius in 141 AD as per the Julian calendar. So what he did was, surely the ancient Egyptians had their calendar by then, so he deducted 1,460 years, thereby obtaining the year 1321 to 1320 BC. But the ancient Egyptians were around well before this already, so that can't be when they founded their calendar. So he deducted another 1,460 years. And you get the year 2781 to 2780 BC. Still, ancient Egyptian civilization is so old that it was already 300 to 200 years old by then, the ancient Egyptian state. And by the way, that's when Narmer or Menes unified Upper and Lower Egypt, allegedly. That's the subject of our next video, by the way. So, the ancient Egyptian state, if it was already around for 300 to 200 years by then surely their calendric system was founded well before that too. So he deducted another 1,460 years, thereby obtaining the magic number, 4,241 BC. So this year is allegedly, according to Edward Meyer, the year in which the ancient Egyptians started founded their calendric system. But let me remind you that this is based on assumption. And let's not forget, Oh, and by the way, the 19th of July, he said, because, that's when the heliacal rising of Sirius happens. So the 19th of July, 4,241. In fact, he gives the range, 4,241 to 4,240. And then he, after many long arguments and calculations and things, he enlarges the range a little bit more from 4,241 to 4,238. Still a small range, but still, this is based on assumption, right? It doesn't necessarily follow that this is actually what the ancient Egyptians did, right? Because, like I said, the difference between when the new year began and the heliacal rising of Sirius began happened, the difference in timing between the two isn't very noticeable. But his calculations were based on astronomical calculations that are very precise. It doesn't necessarily mean that's exactly when the ancient Egyptians started. That's number one. Another thing to remember is, of course, the way it's timed with the Nile flood. The Nile flood itself isn't precise. And there could be a whole host of other factors at play here that I'm just not aware of, just because, this is such a complicated subject. So anyway, to make a very long story short, here are, so far, we've got 3 reasons why it's like us saying Happy New Year to each other about 2 weeks ago was not based on anything actually factual. And that's because the ancient Egyptians themselves did not count their years in this way. They never would have said to each other, 3,000 years ago, Happy New Year, happy 3,200, I don't know what, or something. They never would have done that, because they always reset their numbering of years whenever there was a new king on the throne. So that already disproves it. But even assuming Edward Meyer is correct in his calculations for 4,200 whatever, as like being around the time when the ancient Egyptians founded their calendric system, not how they counted their years, mind you, like I said. Even then, you can't just randomly say 4,241 is the year I'm choosing, because don't forget, Edward Meyer himself gave a range of dates. So if you were to randomly instead say 4,239 BC instead of 4,238, 40, 41, or 42 or whatever, then you're compelled to say happy 6,261, 60? Anyway, you get the idea. There's a lot of randomness involved here, because you're randomly picking from a range of 4 years in which to say, okay, this is the new year now. This is the year numbering. So it could just as easily not be 6,263, but 62, 61, or 60. So that's reason number 2. Reason number 3 is the 19th. So remember how I said the heliacal rising of Sirius took place on the 19th of July, at least according to the Gregorian calendar? Well, 2 weeks ago, it wasn't the 19th of July. It was the 11th of September. Of course, depends on when I upload this video and such, but the 11th of September was when people were wishing each other a Happy New Year. Well, this discrepancy between the 19th of July and 11th of September is due to the fact that 19th of July is, the heliacal rising, but people are wishing each other a Happy New Year on the 11th of September based on New Year's Day in the Coptic calendar. Now, the Coptic calendar is based on the ancient Egyptian calendar, but now you're just picking and choosing. Not only did you randomly choose the year 4,241 BC as the founding event of this calendar instead of anything between then and 4,238, but you're also randomly, arbitrarily saying, I'm going to deny or refute and not ignore the 19th of July, but I'm going to use instead the Happy New Year's Day of the Coptic calendar, which is the 11th of September. So two arbitrary decisions right there. So, this is a complete fabrication. You can't say Happy New Year on the 11th of September for year 6263 because, well, you randomly chose that instead of the 19th of July, and you picked it based on that number, the date that Edward Meyer arrived to. And then also, that's not what the ancient Egyptians themselves did. So three reasons. And reason number 4 is you can't even assume that Edward Meyer is correct, even in those ranges. Because this book having been published in 1904, there have been a lot more studies since then that have refined his arguments, others have rejected them, and so all this is to say that no Egyptologist today maintains that the ancient Egyptians founded their calendar in 4241 BC. So there you have it. Wishing each other a Happy New Year is special, like so you can feel free to wish each other Happy New Year around when when Sirius rises with the sun for the first time after its 70-day absence. Feel free to wish each other a Happy New Year in September during the Coptic New Year. After all, I mean, September is still within the season of the inundation, so it's still, the beginning of the year. So I guess Happy New Year to you all, and I'll see you in the next video when we talk about Narmer, or Menes, as the unifier of Egypt.